Led by one of the emerging stars in college football, how does Arizona State's offense stack up in 2020? Next on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Breaking down Herm Edwards and the Sun Devils here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We invite you into our discussion that we have each and every day across the nation with college football media guests, best discussion, debate, and analysis. We got Michelle Gardner on the line from Arizona Republic. Michelle, how are you doing these days?
I'm doing just dandy. How are you?
We're doing just fine. This is always an interesting take because of the narratives you bring, plus the Herm Edwards dynamic, because there's always some recent event or dissertation that he's given that's quite impactful, and we'll get into some of that later. We're going to talk offense first, and it, of course, begins with Jayden Daniels. And considering some of the issues along the offensive line, him being thrown in from week one, quite a remarkable freshman season in throwing just 2 interceptions, leading a number of comeback victories against some big opponents in the big 400-yard game against Oregon. Your thoughts about his progression as we go to 2020?
Well, not only did he have 2 interceptions last year, one of those was a Hail Mary at the end of a half, so he really only had one. Obviously, last year, ASU went conservative on offense because of the issues on the offensive line and Jayden being a true freshman. It was kind of go back there, don't get killed. I mean, they literally put the reins on him and said, don't do too much, don't run out of the pocket if you don't have to. So it was just a very, very conservative approach, and it worked. They went 8-5. You know, obviously this year the reins are off. He's going to be turned loose to do what he does best. Zach Hill has come in as the offensive coordinator, and he came from Boise State, and everybody kind of knows what they did offensively. So this is going to be Jayden at his best, because I think this offense suits him as a quarterback. You know, they're going to roll 2 tight ends out there, 3 tight ends, motion. And if you listen to Antonio Pierce, the defensive coordinator, he said that Zach Hill brings a lot of funk and spunk. Okay, so that's an interesting dynamic. And like I said, with Jayden's improvisation skills, the techniques, and the way he can scramble, this offense is tailor-made for him.
So it's one thing to say, okay, we've got our freshman phenom who's got all that experience under his belt now, and we're going to turn him loose and make him more of an impactful player and a little bit less conservative, as he really fit well in checking down and really making the smart plays last year. But they cut him loose this year. But he loses his stabilizing force in the backfield, and Eno Benjamin, he could always turn around, hand it to him, and let him go. And obviously his 2 most productive threats on the outside in Brandon Ayuk and in also Kyle Williams. So where do they go for offense in regards to playmakers? And you got Frank Darby, and that's really the only name that most people know at this point.
Right. That's definitely the case. But people said 2 years ago, what are they going to do with N'Keal Harry gone? And look what Ayuk did. Now Ayuk's gone, and Darby will be the guy, I think, to step up. In talking to running backs coach Sean Iguano, he said that when they went out and recruited running backs, they knew with Eno gone, they had to recruit guys that were ready to come in and play right now, guys that were physically ready and mentally ready. And if you look at the roster, there are 0 yards returning from a running back on this roster. Okay, Jayden Daniels is the only person with rushing yards returning from the backfield. So when they went out and looked for running backs, Iguano said, no, we want guys that are going to play now, not guys that we want to be a project or a red shirt. So you've got Danielle Nagata from Northern California and Diamante Trayanum, and he goes by Chip, okay, and he's out of Ohio, and ASU plucked him right out of Big Ten territory. So those are 2 guys that are going to carry the load. And it's kind of like a lightning and thunder combination, where you've got a guy that can kind of plow through people, run over people, and then you've got your kind of lightning quick out of the backfield back. So I think this might be a great combination, because whereas you had Eno and everybody knew Eno was getting the ball, now you've got a couple of options and you don't have to rely on one player.
We talked about Darby coming back, 31 catches, 8 touchdowns. Ayuk takes 65 catches with him. Williams another 45. That's 110 receptions. Who do you expect to step in there?
Well, obviously, I think Darby's the guy. And if you looked after the draft, ASU had back-to-back first-round wide receivers, and Darby was tweeting out, okay, it's going to be 3 next year. So he's obviously a little optimistic. But Frank's had a tendency to drop an easy ball here or there. Great player. He can stretch the field. He needs to really focus and be – now I think he will now that he knows he's going to be the guy. And then after that, you've got 4 4-star recruits coming in. That it's the greatest wide receiving class ASU's ever signed. So you've got 4 4-star receivers coming in addition to a couple guys that saw some time last year that looked like they had potential, like a Ricky Pearsall, a Jordan Curley. So they had a few guys that got time last year that I think that'll factor in, along with those 4 4-star receivers.
So, Michelle, the offensive line was not a strength last year, but a couple of transfers come in. Kellen Deach from Texas A&M and Henry Hattis from Stanford for a rushing offense that only produced 123 yards per game.
Kellen Deach is the man. I mean, he's the guy. And even before he got here, Herm kept saying, when spring football starts, look at our left tackle. Look at our left tackle. Look at our left tackle. He's a big dude, and he's played in the SEC. A little backstory to him is that Dave Christensen, ASU's offensive line coach, came from Texas A&M, and he originally recruited Kellen Deach to Texas A&M. So that was kind of a natural connection there for Deach when he was looking to go somewhere to come to ASU. So I think having those 2 grad transfers really, really solidifies this line. And you look at a Henry Hattis who started 6 games in the Pac-12 at Stanford last year before he got hurt. And then the other factor, they have a guy named Cade Cody who will probably be the center. He is a 6th-year senior, and he was granted a 6th year of eligibility as well. So you look at those 3 guys, and that's a lot of experience up front. And then you take the 2 guys that played as true freshmen in Donovan West and Ladarius Henderson. Baptism under fire last year as true freshmen, but they started the whole year, and now they're going to be a year better. So I think that the biggest difference in this team this year is going to be that the offensive line is in way better shape than it was this time last year.